Gray is here on the Blaze Radio Network.
Good morning, American. It's Friday.
And we're pretty excited about it. Today we have Dr. Brian Thomas in from the ICR Institute, the Institute for Creation Research, in to talk about the young Earth theory. This is our once-a-month Friday conspiracy show. This isn't really
we got to come up with a different name.
Because for days like this, this is just an alternate theory that
alternate theory
many Christians
Friday.
believe in.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so welcome, Brian. Thanks for being here.
Thanks.
So you've got a 1999 master's biotechnology degree, right, from Stephen F. Austin. In 2008, you joined the ICR as a science writer and editor. 2019, got your PhD in paleobiochemistry. That's about a year before I got mine. I think was it a year, Keith? It
was right in that time.
Yeah.
I don't want to.
Yeah, I didn't want to brag about it because it was later than yours, of course. But you've taught and now. So what is it exactly you do at the institute? A lot of research.
I do. Well, it's as a research scientist, I try to juggle several functions. One is, of course, lab research, a lot of literature research, the regular science stuff, and then, but also speaking and writing. So writing articles, writing books, and filling in gaps.
Yeah.
Right.
And there are a lot of gaps, aren't there, to fill? Because, I mean, science, while they claim to know everything, and we're supposed to buy into everything they say to us, and then it changes the next year, they still have a lot of stinking gaps to fill. And we'll get into that. But you've also written several books, including Dinosaurs in the Bible and Ancient and Fossil Bone Collagen Remnants. That's what why the world? Yes. Why the world looks so young, okay? And Dinosaurs in the Bible. That's really fascinating. I've always loved dinosaurs. I'm a 4-year-old kid at heart, so
Me too.
I'm excited about that.
Yes.
Yeah. So, okay, tell us about the young Earth theory.
Sure. Well, we call it biblical creation.
Okay.
And which is to say that we have adopted this timeline of world history that we derive from the Bible. Mm-hmm. And then what we do is I'll tell you how I came to that position from believing in whatever I was taught growing up.
Yeah, everything's supposed to be 28 million or 40 million years ago, right?
Well, the Earth is 4.5 billion, and the universe 13.7 billion.
They just changed that to 27 billion, was it? They just almost doubled it.
Well, it depends on which astrophysicist you want to talk to.
Again, there's the gaps. I mean,
yes,
know, even the Big Bang theory has come under fire from some in science.
Absolutely. Well, it's been criticized for decades.
Yeah,
and for good reasons. But anyway, I went from believing all that to the biblical creation position because of the Institute for Creation Research scientists who lived before my generation.
Okay.
And so I'm on their shoulders, and I appreciate what they wrote back in the day because I never had learned until I read their stuff, and I did not want to read it, but a friend challenged me. Mm-hmm. How do you refute these creationists? I was like, easy, they're stupid, But he said, give me reasons, give me some science, give me some data, give me some experiments, give me something solid. And I was like, all right, I'll go ahead and do this for you. And trying to do him a service, right? Mm-hmm. And I get in there and I go, wait a minute, this makes sense. Like the actual rocks, the actual fossils, really do show evidences that match the idea that they were flooded. Like these are flood rocks. These are flood burials. This really matches Noah's flood. And when so if you have the whole rock column being deposited in 1 year, only thousands of years ago, there goes your millions of years. There's no time for evolution. So my whole worldview started to change. And then I had to know more. And I just dug in at that point. And I came out the other side going, I never would have thought that the Bible was exactly right on these matters of history, but now it's it's turning out that way. So that's a little bit of my story.
Okay. And what is it exactly? I mean, I think we all started out believing the scientific theory because that's what we were taught in school. Is that the Earth is 4.5 billion years old, the universe is 13 or 14 billion years old, and you just go along with it. Well, yeah, that makes sense. So then you hear about this, and it sounds silly. It sounds preposterous, and so you get made fun of, right?
Yes.
Yeah. Do you encounter a lot of that?
I'm pretty well insulated.
Yeah.
From that, we have departments at the Institute who shield us from a lot of the trolls. We post things online, and trolls scoff.
Yeah, I bet. I'll bet.
With vim and ridicule and rigor. So
Welcome
anyway,
to 2023.
Yeah. Well, they're insulted by it, and
as I was,
it threatens their world.
It does.
Yeah.
As I was.
Yeah.
But you mentioned the word science there, and I just want to clarify that. So, did you hear yourself? I heard you say, "We all grew up going with the science."
Yeah.
Yes.
Well, that's what it was, right?
But it was at the time it was science, and I perceived it as being scientifically based.
Right.
But as a scientist, as I've uncovered more and more about how they assign these ages, it's less and less scientific, and it's more and more worldview based in my perspective. So I know I'm saying I'm a biblical creationist. I put the Bible first, but I arrived at that position through uncovering how unscientific the quote unquote science of age dating really was. Does that make any sense?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it does.
I find it fascinating that, and one of the things that we learned or were shown at your institute, which was fascinating, that so much or all of the layers on the earth, you talked about how the layers, it had to have been a flood, right? A massive flood in a short period of time to create the way that the land is, that all over the world, it's the same layers. Right, I mean that's amazing to me, and I'd never heard that from scientists before.
But that's good science because it's based on observation. I mean, that's step one if you're going to do good science is observe something.
Right,
and so but you have to be willing in this case to look at a really broad picture. Most geologists, almost all geologists, focus on one area, one region. Some geologists focus on one outcrop. And so it's rare the geologist who tries to tie together or even is willing to look at, does this rock here, this layer, this thickness, this rock type, with the fossils that are peculiar to it, does it also occur, like, let's say, on another continent? The answer turns out to be yes.
Yes.
And
Yeah.
it's all the continents. And so it takes a worldwide cause to produce such a worldwide effect. And that's what we've found. And it's stunning confirmation of this history that we get in the Bible, not just in Genesis, but the New Testament confirms this history as having really taken place, a world-destroying flood. I know it sounds crazy, and it sounded crazy to me when I first heard it, but like you said, when I looked at the evidence of the actual rocks, it started to make sense. And boy, it took me a long time. It took me 5 years to answer question after question. It's like turning the Titanic, to believe, to change my beliefs one at a time. So.
Yeah, and to Jeffy's point, I mean, your center over here, just a mile from us, is absolutely fascinating. And one of the things that really stuck out to me over there was the Mount St. Helens. Just the just what's been happening to the rocks in the last 40 years there, just lends credence to the fact that it does not take billions upon billions of years to carve out rock and sediment. It's fascinating how quickly it can happen.
It's funny. I was there visiting, and I walked up on a tour group being led by the official park ranger, and the park ranger was this young kid, probably fresh out of college, and therefore knows everything.
I'm just trying to do the tour, okay? Leave me alone, will you?
Right. And so he's saying, and he brings the group to a precipice where you can overlook this gorge, and you could see in the walls of the inner walls of this gorge, you can see layers exposed. And so one of the guys in the tour raised his hand and said, like, how long ago did this happen? How long did it, and then he said, how long did it take for this gorge to form?
Right.
And the young guy looks back and looks at the audience and looks back at the gorge and looks back at the audience. I'm like, tell the guy it happened in 1982. So the eruption in 80, and then a subsequent event in 82 carved the gorge.
Right.
We saw it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's recorded, 1982. And the guy was like, the ranger was like, I don't know, but it must have been since the 1980s.
I mean, it takes more faith to believe in evolution and that we crawled out of a slime, or from dirt, than it does to believe in the creation story.
Wow, you're a topic switcher. Bam. Okay, different topic.
Well, no,
I better be ready when I come here this early.
I think the point I'm trying to make is that this kid at the Mount St. Helens thing is just giving the tour, man. There's no curiosity, and nobody cares. They just accept with blind faith these stories that I don't know. It took billions of years, sure, I guess, I don't know, and they can't explain it. But you can look at something like the Bible, and there's generation after generation, and we got to get into that, by the way, as well. The population should be so much more. So I'm throwing 3 topics at you at once. How do you like that?
Well, I understand. Yeah, I think I catch your drift. And
Just generally speaking, the faith that's required to believe the evolution story as opposed to creation.
The doctrine is each layer takes eons.
Yes.
And then each carving happens, gorges happen, valleys happen,
Right.
one grain at a time. That takes
Right.
eons also. So to deposit it, eons, and more eons to carve it out. That's the doctrine. That's what I was taught when I got my minor in geology. I mean, every class teaches you the same thing. It's like a gavel on the desk. It's slow and gradual. It's slow and gradual. It's slow and gradual.
Right.
And then you go to Mount St. Helens, and the deposition of layers and then the carving of those layers both happened in 2 separate catastrophes. Both happened in 1 day each. 1 day, and then you wait 2 years, and then another day, a gorge carved like
That's
that.
amazing. That's amazing.
And so for him, so you're right. It's like a paradigm shift. And he's like, I was taught all this stuff in geology class, but here I am standing here, and this guy's asking me a question, and the actual answer doesn't match at all what I was taught.
Yeah.
So where in the Bible does it specifically say that the Earth is 7,000 years old? Are you just?
It doesn't. There's no one place.
So right. So basically, you're going on that the Earth was created. The creation process was 6 days, right? And then you got the day of rest. So there's nothing before that, right?
Well, that's.
But I've never.
That's right. So that's pretty much right. And but if you go into the 10 Commandments, Exodus 20 verse 11, for in 6 days the Lord made the heavens and the earth and the seas, and rested on the 7th day. That summarizes. That's the beginning.
It's a busy 6 days.
Yeah. Do you look on it as I do that a day to the Lord is about 1,000 years?
Oh no.
No,
I mean,
you
I
don't.
used to.
Okay.
But then I looked. Yeah, I looked at that verse in Exodus 20:11. I was like, well, if each day is 1,000 years, it doesn't do justice either to the text, and it doesn't help. It doesn't help squeeze any time into the.
What does?
Yeah. So it all it does is give opportunity for maybe some extra fossils to form way back then, but the fossils formed in the flood, and so with that position, which I used to hold, it took me a while to really. But by the way, it comes from Peter. There's a verse in 2 Peter that says, "With the Lord, a day is as 1,000 years." But then the rest of that verse says, "And 1,000 years is as a day." So I thought, well, that erases that idea, and he's not even talking about creation in that verse. So, but if we have death, if we have fossils happening before sin, before the garden, then we have death before sin, and then we have effectively erased the logical foundation for the gospel by saying, because in the Bible it's perfect first, or not perfect, but very good, and then and then temptation, then sin. And then the consequence of sin is death. Death means separation. Separation from God is the consequence there.
Right.
And then that's what happened. And so God came down in Genesis chapter 3 and said, or I guess he came over and said, this is it. You're now going to have to suffer the consequence. So here comes the death that I promised, in the one law I gave you guys. And so there we have, oh no, that's the problem. Death is now a part of reality. And by the way, that's the final enemy, and that's the reason Jesus came to die, pay the death penalty himself, so that we would have an opportunity to by trusting in him to escape that death penalty one day. But if we have death having existed for eons before sin, then we have created a conundrum, both theologically with the death problem, and also exegetically, because that's not what the words say. The words say a day, and a day means day, and it even defines day in the creation week by saying evening and morning multiple times there. So I went through all these different positions, as you can read in my book, Dinosaurs in the Bible, there, and I kind of give an overview of why I landed on the straightforward interpretation there of Genesis 1.
Okay. And where do dinosaurs fit in this? They lived concurrently with humans?
So day 6, God made the creatures, land creatures.
Okay. Yeah.
And then at the end of day 6, Adam and Eve. And so we look at dinosaur fossils because we're pretty sure there's no longer alive today. So
pretty sure.
Yeah. So
we don't know that.
They have legs. They have legs, and so they were able to walk on land, and so that I would call them a day 6 creature. So according to the Bible, God would have made them on during creation week. So that means they lived with humans but not at the same place necessarily. I mean,
right?
We don't live with. We don't build our houses in swamps. Let's say they lived in swamps like alligators. And by the way, all the dinosaur layers have alligator or what they call crocodiliforms in them. And
they're not from there. They're not. They were already created. They were part of that, right? I mean, the crocodiles and the gators were living with the dinosaurs.
Yes.
Yeah.
And water birds we see. Like ducks and loons and albatross, all in those dino layers. Anyway, so for that reason, I think they lived at the same time during in the pre-flood world, but not in the same place. People don't live in swamps.
Yeah. I mean, there was a lot going on in Creation Week. It's a little bit more exciting than even Shark Week. But correct me if I'm wrong.
Shark Week was part of Creation Week, actually.
I see. Correct me if I'm wrong, but I thought I saw something recently that said that there were cave drawings of what appeared to be dinosaurs. Is that something you're familiar with? I might need to look into that, but have you ever heard of anything like that? Well,
you went to the Discovery Center, and maybe you saw the Dragon Encounters wall.
Yeah, we did.
And we have on display some pictographs and artifacts from all over the world that resemble. Some of them are just generalized, like large monster type things, and so you can't really say much about those except ask the question. What were they looking at when they did this art 1,000 years ago or 2,000 years ago?
Pretty interesting.
And then some of them, however, have specific anatomical features that they did in the artwork that match exactly what we see from just fossils and nothing else live today. And that tells us that these dinosaurs or other extinct reptiles. I would say that they survived the flood, either on board the ark or through the ark, or through the waters, like fishes did, survived through the waters, and then they lived for some time after the flood.
And people saw them.
People saw them.
Bill saw it and drew a picture of it in the cave, right?
Right.
I mean, it might not have been Bill.
Right.
It might have been Fred, but one of them.
Exactly. Yeah. And then
So you do think dinosaurs survived the flood? They weren't killed off in the flood, and what did kill them then eventually? Do you have any thoughts on that?
I do. But I don't know because I wasn't there. And you're asking me a question about history.
Apparently, it wasn't a comet, though, right?
What?
It wasn't a comet. That would have killed off humanity too at the same time.
It would have killed the frogs.
Yeah.
You're
right.
And so that's one of the details that certain secular scientists have raised this objection to the very common now notion that an impact killed the dinosaurs, because you see frog fossils in the layers with dinosaurs, and then you also see frog fossils in the layers right above the supposed impact, but the thin-skinned frogs would have died first.
Yeah.
Not the thick-skinned, big, tough reptiles would have you'd seen that would have survived. And the layers themselves are so thick and so extensive; they go for hundreds of square miles, a single layer. And so an impact might have deposited some sort of layer like that thick
that
near the impact site, but not 1,000 miles away from the Yucatan, over, or whatever the mileage is. It's a long way to get from the Yucatan to Montana. So anyway, I told my son this because he was in a biology class, and he said, "Dad, the teacher said that an impact killed the dinosaurs," because everyone just believes it, and it's convenient to just jump on the bandwagon and go with the flow, right?
Yep.
And I said, "Well, ask your professor about the frogs." And so the next day he comes back. How'd the conversation go in class? I raised my hand and said, "This is how my son talks, by the way."
Yeah. All of our sons talk like that.
Yeah, it's when they're teenagers. Now he's a real human, so that's a wonderful thing. I raised my hand and I said, "What about the frogs that are the frog fossils that are that are in the layers below and the layers above? Wouldn't the impact have killed the frog fossils?" And the prof goes, "Okay, next question."
Oh, wow.
Didn't even answer it. Didn't even attempt to answer it. They had no interest in having a dialogue.
Because they can't. They can't answer it.
Why don't you shut up, kid?
Yeah.
Guys, sit down.
Exactly.
Then it's either belittling or just ignoring.
Right.
We see that today from a number of different sources. So what is the age of the universe then? The same as the age of the Earth? Or
it is. Yeah.
Okay. So 7,000 years for all stars, and do you not believe that space is immense then? That it's
yes, it's immense.
So okay,
So how do you get
That's
that?
where we got the 28 billion, right? Was from space, because we got with the James Webb telescope, they tell us that they just found the star that was 28 billion light years away, right? Mm-hmm.
So how did light reach us in 7,000 years?
Okay,
From these distant places.
I have a simple one-word answer. Ready? Miracle.
Okay.
Okay.
All right.
And I think miracle is you have to look at the supernatural as an option here. It's got to be on the table, because let's say I just asked you this question: did the universe have a beginning? That's just yes or no.
Okay.
If in the secular, materialistic, anti-supernatural paradigm, if within that paradigm we say, yes, the universe had a beginning, then suddenly you have to think there was a time when there was nothing, and then there was a time when there's everything. And so you go from nothing to everything. Well, that violates the first law of thermodynamics, the law of conservation of mass energy, which says that the total amount of mass energy in the universe remains constant. You can convert between different forms of energy, but the total amount stays the same. And so we don't want to violate laws of thermodynamics, do we? Well, let's pick the other option. No, the universe had no beginning. Well, that means the universe is eternal, which means the stars would have burned out an eternity ago, but they're not. They're still shining. It's like if I have a coffee cup, and you can hold that coffee cup, and if it feels hot, that means it was put there pretty recently.
Right.
But eventually that coffee cup is going to irradiate all of its heat. Well, in like manner, stars, galaxies radiate their light and they burn out. So the stars should have all burned out if the universe is an eternity old. And so that violates the second law. The first answer violates the first law. So what we have to do is think outside this constraining box of matter is all there is. We have to think outside of that and go, well, what if there was a beginning, but a creator began it? So it's not just nature only, but we're talking about supernatural as an option. And to me, that's the best way. It's the most scientific way. It's the most reasonable way to explain how it all began. This universe looks like it started with a miracle. And the alternatives violate the laws of the most fundamental laws of all physics and chemistry.
Well, the Big Bang Theory itself is problematic, and many scientists are acknowledging that, and some have even gotten off the Big Bang bandwagon. We saw one with 3 scientists, and one that we were familiar with. I can't remember his name right now, but one that used to, what's his name? Used to hang out with us once in a while. He'd be on Glenn's show and all of that. But the 3 of them sat around and talked about how the Big Bang Theory is just not accurate. It's just not possible. But essentially, there was some sort of matter, right, that superheated or whatever process happened to make it explode, and that explosion created the universe, right, and everything in it. And that randomness is just accepted by everybody. Oh, okay, yeah, huh,
right.
Yeah. So we were nothing, and then nothing exploded into everything.
There you go.
It makes perfect sense.
Tell you.
So why don't
Requires
you
more
sit
faith
down
than-
back there and shut up?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. I don't want to hear from you anymore. Shut your mouth, you stupid religious zealot. And that's kind of how people deal with that. So what do you tell people who dismiss what you believe about the Big Bang Theory?
I don't. I'm done telling.
Are you?
Yeah. So what I do is, if it's a one-on-one situation, I'm just asking them what they believe and why you believe it. That's it. So I just go, these are my magic questions. What do you mean by that? What do you mean by that? And I just let them define what they're talking about, and then I say, and what led you to that conclusion, or some variation of that. And I just ask and ask and ask until finally, in a conversation, and it usually takes about 20 minutes at least, if not a few years of multiple conversations before someone will finally come around and say, I'm not sure why I believe that. It's just what I was taught. I'm like, okay, well, how did what led them to? What gives you confidence that they got it right? And finally, with those kinds of questions, that's what helps people to come to their own conclusions about these matters. And if they're diligent enough and willing to think outside of of the box, and actually you have to kind of be willing to consider an option that other people don't believe and don't agree with, and I'm not going to be cool. And being cool is a huge, this social pressure is real.
Oh yeah,
it's real, and who wants
Nobody
to be
wants
the
to be
maverick?
ridiculed,
Right. No.
Yeah.
So that's, but I just ask questions anymore.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Have we ever seen a star get created?
No.
Yeah.
Not ever.
Interesting.
Nor have we ever found the missing link, right, between humanity and apes, if that's where we evolved from.
Well, I'll put it this way: for every missing link that one paleoanthropologist proposes, there's another paleo expert who looks at the same supposed missing link and says, "No way, that can't be the missing link because look at these anatomical features X, Y, and Z." And so every single one so far has its detractors.
Yeah.
So there's no unanimous. The field is so rife with subjectivity that it gives me no confidence that it's really good science. It's like you can grade science on how high quality or low quality it is.
Yeah.
And this is on the low quality end. Yeah.
We've got much more to go over with Dr. Brian Thomas from the ICR Institute on the young Earth. We'll get into that coming up.
Pat Gray Unleashed.
welcome. Thanks for being with us. 888-900-3393 if you've got a question for our guest, Dr. Brian Thomas. We've also got some questions via tweets, and we'll get to those in just a second. It's fascinating. We're talking about the Earth being 7,000 years old. Is it 7 or is it 6? Because there's, 6 after the 7,000 years. That's when things are supposed to end, right? I mean,
so say 6,
right?
Say 6.
Maybe
Okay,
5
6.
even, because there's a millennial time in there somewhere, and so yeah. Lone Wolf 2965 says, I don't know. I can totally believe that Jeffy crawled out of the slime and dirt.
I mean,
That's probably their best piece of evidence.
Yeah.
On that side of the argument.
From Furion Energy, I hope elemental half-life is addressed. So what can you tell us about elemental half-life?
Oh, it's a way to measure like the decay rate of various like radioactive isotopes, and that's the decay rate that researchers use to assign ages to igneous rocks. So these are rocks that cooled from melt. So you're talking lavas and granites and things like that. Speaking of Mount St. Helens and radioisotopes, so in Mount St. Helens, in the dome there that was created when it exploded in May 18th, 1980, subsequent eruptions of lava deposited some lava rock. It's called dacite. And so 10 years after the rock solidified or lithified or formed, our scientists went up and sampled those and sent those samples to various standard, secular, mainstream radioisotope age-dating laboratories.
where we get the information of how old things are, right? I mean,
Correct.
we believe what they say. Or,
Correct.
Or we're supposed to, anyway.
Yeah. And so the samples came back, drum roll, was it 10 years? Oh, you actually have a drum roll.
Yeah, we got
hold on.
we got you covered.
Bam. That's a long drum roll. Okay.
Very, still a little bit of time, but okay.
Boom. So the samples came back with age assignments on the order of some samples came back 500,000 isotope years, and some came back around 2 million isotope years.
Wow.
Now, is the rock 2 million, 500,000, or 10 years old? Well, we know it's 10 years old because we saw it and we watched it.
Yeah.
And so if
That's fascinating.
What do they use for the argument of that? That it's that old because it came from inside the Earth, and that's the age
the melt
that it landed.
The melting process is supposed to redistribute all the elements and wipe the slate clean, and that's when the clock starts ticking. Is when this thing solidifies. And that's the theory upon which the whole system is
So
based.
it came back as old as 2 million years.
Correct.
When
And
it happened 10 years
that's
prior.
what those are typical results. When
Thought
we
I was
test,
bad at math.
Oh, wow. Yeah. That's a big difference.
It's
10
That is
years,
a big difference.
2 million, whatever. We're in the ballpark.
It's a rounding
It's
error.
a big ballpark.
It's a rounding error.
Hey. So carbon dating, is it just not accurate? Is that because they tell us, well, that's been carbon dated back to 10 billion years ago.
Yeah,
So-
it's complicated. Actually, the answer is it depends. So there's something going on with the really ancient Earth and its ratio of carbon-14 to carbon-12. That's what it measures. When we do radioisotope dating, we're measuring an isotope ratio. How much of this isotope or version of an atom versus that version of the atom or the isotope. We're not measuring time. So you have to take the isotope ratios, plug those into a big formula, and the formula has variables in it, which are unknowns, and you have to plug in those unknowns with guesses. And that's where you can insert your belief system into the whole process.
Wow.
So when we do that with radiocarbon dating, it turns out that we get really solid results by comparing those results with like other historical artifacts that are buried in the same layer. When you go back 2,000 years, even sometimes 2,500 years, the radioisotope ages match other age dating techniques. But when you go further back than that, like the time of the Exodus, there's a systematic offset, and the radioisotope ages tend to increase and increase and increase. So the further back you go, the further away from calendar years those carbon years become. Isn't that interesting?
Yeah.
So something was going on back then to skew the very old carbon. Now, carbon dating only goes back 50,000 carbon years in that system. That's the maximum age. But guess what? We've been able to use that at our institute to sort of do a worldview test. So we were able to take a carbon from dinosaur bone and send that to the standard dating labs. And every time we do that, it comes back with radiocarbon still in the bone. And so that means it looks younger than, let's say 100,000 years, carbon years, max age. We'll just double it for fun. And so we have young-looking radiocarbon still in fossils. It's published in the mainstream literature too. So it's not just crazy creationists. It's and you can look all this up at icr.org, and we have all kinds of information. So and even diamonds. We're the first scientists to take diamonds, which are pure carbon, and submit them to a radiocarbon dating facility, and they found radiocarbon still in the diamonds. Now that should be carbon dead or zero radiocarbon after 100,000 carbon years, but these diamonds are supposed to be 3 billion with a B, like banana, years old, and they have radiocarbon still in them. So whether we test
I know that's
coal,
what I paid for. I'll tell you that.
yeah, they're expensive. Yeah. So anyway, whether it's diamonds, coal, natural gas, fossils, every earth material that has carbon in it, so far tested by secular or creation-believing scientists, the data keeps showing over and over that we have young-looking radiocarbon in all these.
Wow. This might be a good place, since we're talking about fossils, to show the fossil I got from you guys from the ICR Institute. This actually came from the Fossil Museum in Montana, in Glendive, right?
Right.
It is a Triceratops rib. That is so cool.
Looks like an old piece of chocolate.
Oh, it's a vertebrae. I'm sorry. Yeah, it's not a rib. It's a vertebrae. Is it from a Triceratops, though? Oh, okay. It's not a Triceratops.
I mean, it looks like an old piece of chocolate cake, but I digress.
Edmontosaurus. I don't even know what that is. I mean, obviously some kind of dinosaur, but I don't know. Is it similar to a Triceratops?
No.
Okay.
Man, let the Triceratops thing go.
And you're from Montana?
Yes. Very heavy. Looks pretty old, but it can only be something under 7,000 years, right? Not 65 million, which is when they say the dinosaurs ended. So I don't think you got around to when we asked you, what ended the dinosaurs, since we lived with them, but not at the same place?
And then I got sidetracked because I was talking about other stuff. But basically, since I wasn't there, I don't know. That's how I started to answer the question. But so I have to speculate at this point. So my speculation would be the same two main factors that cause animals to go extinct today.
Global warming, climate change. That's what
actually
killed them.
Climate change, yes, because we had this big old thing called an ice age.
Yeah,
and in fact, the flood has the flood model that we have provides the best model for an ice age. How do you get an ice age? Well, you kind of need a flood to make all the hot water and all the evaporation that you need. So talk about climate change. Post ice age, the Middle East went dry. It just dried out. During the ice age, the Middle East was tropical and wet. We had it was very wet. So when you lose habitat, so it's habitat loss due to people moving in or climate change. And that's what I think is the best reasonable explanation.
Interesting.
So you disagree with the new study that suggests the major extinction event roughly 34 million years ago was driven by a sea level drop, as they say, 131 feet in Antarctic ice caps. I mean, that was just released. So
nice.
Yes, I know. And again, every time I see that now, since
going to the ICR,
I think, okay, Stop it.
No, I know that's good science, except for the age assignment. That's the only part I really disagree with. So if we take that sea level, drop or ice melting or whatever, that could have happened during the Ice Age or toward the end of the Ice Age. So it's just taking our timeline and treating it like an accordion.
Got it.
And shrinking it down to what makes the most sense of all the data, including radiocarbon in these ancient fossils, and including what my area of expertise is, which is proteins still in fossils. Proteins last even longer than radiocarbon does. So maybe we should just stick with talking about radiocarbon.
More with Dr. Brian Thomas coming up in a minute. And your questions, if you'd like to ask him something, 888-900-3393, or you can tweet at Pat Unleashed. What would happen if the supply, the global medication supply, dried up right before our eyes? I mean, we've already got some indications of that, right? Supply chain malfunctions going on. We're having some problems getting medication right now. And could it ever get worse? You bet it could. What do you do about it? Well, if you would like to have antibiotics on hand for whatever eventuality in your life, you can get the Jace case from Jace Medical. It's a great way to keep prepared for anything that may happen. It's back of 5 different courses of antibiotics that you can use to treat all kinds of different bacterial illnesses, UTIs, respiratory infections, sinus infections. Give this a real thought and then act on it today. You can be ready for whatever comes your way, or this is a great way to prepare for a vacation if you're traveling out of state and you don't have access to your doctor and your pharmacy. Jace case from Jace Medical. Go there, enter the promo code PAT at checkout, and you'll save. That's promo code PAT at jasemedical.com.
This is Pat Gray Unleashed.
Millennial Pathead tweets, I don't understand why it always has to be creationist versus evolution. Why not both? We've seen evolution, sometimes over a long period, sometimes short. Why can't people believe we were created by a God to evolve and change? How do you respond to that, Brian?
This imports a lot. A lot of assumptions. You can believe whatever you want. It's a free country. Yay!
Is it?
It's decreasingly free. So, and I used to believe that, of course, but I think it's helpful to consider the alternatives. And if you want to go full on atheistic evolution, that's an option. But then if you And then if you want to consider the biblical creation position, like I did, do that. And then if you want to land somewhere in the middle, like most people do, that's your prerogative. But all I'm saying is, the biblical creation position is where I ended up.
Right.
And I ended up there because of the evidence.
But I think what he's saying here is I have a scientist professor brother-in-law, and he believes that God created the process by which we evolved. So, in other words, he started the evolution process, and that's the creation process.
Then it just goes.
Now, I don't know what his process is. I don't know how that works. That does go against what the Bible says, that we're literally formed from the dust of the earth. But, a lot of people believe certain Bible verses are allegory. So, how do you think that's not possible, that he created the process by which we evolved?
I think it does a disservice to the Bible. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So if the Bible actually is the Word of God, and if God's the authority in this matter, because He was actually there, and He said, I created Adam out of the dust of the earth, I created Eve out of his side, then for us to say, sorry God, you got it wrong, we actually know that we came from apes instead. So in that case, we have to reclassify certain parts of God's word.
Yeah.
But the thing is, when we start down that road, then we end up going, well, what parts do we reclassify and what parts do we not? Because there's no indicator in the text itself that we should treat this text as not history, when in fact it's laid out as historical narrative text.
Yeah.
And so, and also it robs glory from the Lord Jesus Christ, who the Bible credits as the creator. And so if we're going to say, well, natural processes did it, God just was behind it all. Well, that's no longer a miracle. Okay. And so he's supposed to get the credit for the miracle that's the biggest miracle that ever happened, was literally the creation of everything. Mm-hmm. And so if we're going to start robbing God of his miracles, then we're
it's kind of miraculous, though, to create a process by which all of this happened, right? I mean, isn't that initial?
Overwhelming.
Initially a miracle? I would say that in and of itself is a miracle, but. I mean, it's not that I believe it. I'm just making the argument. I've always had a problem with the evolutionary theory because, for one thing, because that makes Adam and Eve's parents less than human, right? So somewhere along the way,
Right.
we just decided, or the Lord decided, that Adam and Eve were the first people on earth, and I believe they were. So that must mean, okay, well, what were their parents then? Something less.
Correct me if I'm wrong, and I'm terrible at math, in case you're not aware, Doctor. But I guess the general consensus is that humans first walked the earth between 1.4 and 2.4 million years ago. I mean, that seems to be the. I mean, I'm looking at History.com, History Channel, so they're always on the evolution kick. But if the Earth's population, I've got another tab open here, is 7.8 billion, and I saw another tab that apparently I closed, that our population increased by 1 billion over the course of 130 years. At this point in the existence of humans, if it were between 1.4 and 2.4,
we should have hit 7.8 billion a long time ago.
So doesn't that lend credence to the young Earth theory?
Yeah, well, the population growth rate, I think that's a valid argument, and it's a valid observation. If we look at that, why didn't humans have a population growth so much longer ago?
Right.
Yeah.
And the evolutionary paradigm has an answer, and it's an ad hoc sort of a special pleading, like, well, that's because of diseases and but it's
More with Dr. Brian Thomas coming up on Pat Gray Unleashed.
Pat Gray Unleashed.
Pat Gray is here on the Blaze Radio Network.
Good morning, American. It's Friday.
A rock, a river, a tree.
Right.
Hosts to species long since departed, marked the mastodon, the dinosaur, who left dry tokens of their sojourn here on our planet floor.
Here's one of their dry tokens.
Right there. Right there. Appreciate that.
Actually, this is more like one of their innards. It's the vertebrae of an Edmontosaurus.
I mean, that's what we're told, but
is it?
Thank you.
Is it really?
Thank you.
So we're talking to Dr. Brian Thomas about the young Earth theory, and he's from the ICR Institute. And by the way, we highly recommend taking your
Really
family, your
fascinating.
kids to the ICR Institute. It's really fun. It's a great museum. I was very pleasantly surprised. I don't know what I was thinking it was going to be, but it exceeded my expectations.
Absolutely, yeah. It was definitely more than what I expected for sure.
One of the things that we found out there was that you guys are doing actual science. You're doing scientific research. And one of the really cool things you're doing is looking into, it's not even, you guys don't refer to it as evolution. It's adaptation, right? Isn't that's a better word for what happens with us?
Sure. I
We
prefer
adapt
that.
to our surroundings and our environment.
Plants do, animals do, we do too.
Humans do all the
And you've
time.
got some research going on with fish that is fascinating that they showed us when we were there a couple of weeks ago. Tell us a little bit about the adapting that fish, the cave-dwelling fish, do.
Sure. Researchers have been studying these blind cave fish, the Mexican blind tetra, you could call it that, since the 70s. And we've all been fascinated by how did this sighted surface creature with pigment, etc. Looks like a minnow, I guess. How did it enter? When did it enter caves? In central Mexico, and when did it go blind?
Because it's living in darkness,
living in total darkness, and have no pigment. And now evolutionary dogma that I was taught and believed for a long time, of course, would say that this happens over slow and gradual. That was Darwin's insistent doctrinaire position. It's got to happen slowly and gradually by the accumulation of trait differences. And then later biologists said, well, that's got to be mutations. So we call it the neo-Darwinian theory, which means it's mutations is what gives us the differences. So in other words, it must have happened eons ago, and it must have taken eons,
right?
Many, many, many generations for these fish to lose their eyes, and in place of their eyes, they have gained this increased pressure sensors. They have sensitivity and chemical sensors. So chemosensory, and the brain is reorganized to more efficiently process all those different data points coming in. Instead of coming in from an optic nerve, it's coming in from other nerves. So how do you make sense of all those data sensory inputs? And anyway, so now the other hypothesis that we're trying to test is a creation-based idea. It's actually more along the lines of engineering. In fact, we're thinking at the Institute for Creation Research in terms of engineered biology, such that the Creator, which the Bible identifies as the Lord Jesus, would have outfitted the progenitors or the original fish with a suite of options that could be deployed in later generations.
As needed,
or as occurs. And so that's what we're trying to test. So one of the predictions of our model would be that the trait could be deployed rather rapidly. We're not bound and constricted to a slow and gradual deployment process. And so what we have is fish tanks, and we're trying to expose cave fish, which we have, to surface conditions to see what changes might happen. And
well, we don't have 100 million years, Doc, to make that happen. I don't know what you're planning on doing.
Which is, yeah. Isn't it fun that we can do this kind of research because we have a different mindset? So our secular colleagues wouldn't even start this experiment, would they? Because they're locked into thinking that this takes a long time, period.
Yeah. And what are you guys seeing with these fish?
Oh, man. So we were expecting maybe 6 generations down the line, we'd see some sort of changes start to happen.
Yeah.
But in the adults, now these are adult cave fish, which have no eyes, no pigment, very little pigment. They're pink. And they've been that way, breeding that way for countless generations.
Right.
Hundreds, maybe thousands of generations. They look the same exact way. And within 30 days, pigment starts to show up.
Incredible.
And within 45 days, they look like surface fish. Now, they didn't regenerate eyes, but who knows that they might not, or that they might, in some number of generations. And these fish,
but they are adapting. I mean,
yes, but they're doing it. They're doing it because
they're doing it fast. Like you're talking days and maybe 2 months.
And it must be because they have sensors.
Yeah, something's built in there.
Engineered
to
biology.
allow that to happen.
Engineered biology really explains what we're seeing. They have sensors that are tracking. Oh, there's a lot of sunlight or UV radiation, and it's doing DNA damage to my skin. I better protect this skin by deploying pigment to protect my DNA and my skin.
I'm really curious about how secular scientists are responding to that information. Do they know about it?
They don't.
Oh, they don't know about it.
This is fresh.
Ah.
Yeah.
Can't wait till that gets out.
I know.
Because I'd love to hear a response. What do you think of that? Huh? Put that in your pipe and smoke it.
No doubt.
Okay? That's great.
Yeah, and
Fun.
And you said just now that they can't see or they haven't developed that yet. Was there something on the tour, or am I just misremembering that there was some sort of optic activity that had started to happen? Right?
Yeah, even all these blind cape fish, as they develop from the egg, they begin to develop eyes.
Jeez, that's really something.
They begin to, but then at a certain point in their development, the eye degenerates, what they call degenerates, and then they deploy this eyeless version.
But again, you've been experimenting on these fish for 100,000 years ish, somewhere.
And you're running
Million.
experiments both ways, right? You're taking the surface, putting
So
them
we're
in
exposing
darkness.
we're exposing the surface fish to cave conditions, and it turns out that the most significant cave condition, and I'll reveal this to the world. This came at great cost and great expense. To this information that's pretty useless, but is the acid. It's acidic in those caves, and so how do you swim in acid? You have to deploy some.
Should be toxic, right?
Should be, and it is, and we can crank the acid down, the pH down, to where these fish don't make it. But you can anyway. But they do deploy acid. Combating physiological measures. Wow. They increase the size of their blood cells. They change their gill structure, even even as they're adults. So it doesn't take multiple generations to do some of these things. It probably will take generations to do others. So it's an ongoing experiment. But that's what we're curious about: is do we see evidence that we need millions of years or multiple eons of slow and gradual accumulated mutational changes, or not? Or does this happen rapidly? And are these fish were these fish engineered to detect their environment and to deploy trait variations that will thrive in those various environments?
And of course that's the case. Of course God gives them the ability to adapt. Of course.
I mean, we see it in humans.
That shouldn't be a surprise
fish.
to us, but somehow it does, because we've been secularized to believe all these other things, that it takes, 2 million years for that to take place. When in fact you did it in 45 days. That's it. That's amazing. Is there what evidence do you have now against the natural selection?
Well, if natural selection seems more to me to be a philosophy than an observation. What we observe is, I guess you could call it differential survival. So let's say some individuals in a population live and pass on their offspring, and pass more of their offspring on to the next generation than others in a population. But the question is why? And the answer to me is more,
some of us are better than others, Doc.
That's it.
I don't know what you're talking about.
Or some of us were not in the way of the whale who just ate half of our population.
Right.
If we're krill, it's just accidents happen.
Right.
But so I'm thinking more in terms of these traits that we have, and we can deploy. This animal or this plant can deploy a set of traits that were pre-programmed. Mendel, Gregor Mendel with the pea plants.
Oh yeah, Greg. I mean, we go way back
Greg,
here.
yeah.
Oh, that was our big topic a week ago.
Yeah, the pea plants.
No, it wasn't. I saw your topic a week ago.
Busted.
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, he found what we now call our alleles, or different versions of a gene, and so those are pre-programmed, and they were placed in these creatures, by something somewhere. Now, what natural selection has become is a substitute creator. And that's kind of how Darwin set it up. We need to have some way to explain this design without a designer. And natural selection, today it's natural selection of mutants, or neo-Darwinism. But that's all that is a substitute for an actual engineer. And what we're saying is that's not adequate.
We have the actual engineer.
Yeah, we know the actual engineer, and we need to start giving him consideration.
Yeah. I wholeheartely agree. It's amazing how science seems like so many scientists believe that it's either or. They can't be both believers in God and scientists. Whereas the ultimate scientist is God. I mean, he created everything. He knows everything. So it's not incompatible for a scientist to be a believer, is it? I mean, I don't know why they think it is.
Think of this. Historically, every major discipline of science was inaugurated or begun by a Bible-respecting, at least, if not a genuine Christian-believing scientist. You think of Kepler and Newton, Faraday. I mean, these guys studied their Bibles more than they studied the world. And they founded whole new disciplines of science. So, yeah, the scientific age that we're living in started because of the Christian worldview, because of the general beliefs that we get from the Bible. For example, the world is not God itself, pantheism. The world is separate from God. He's outside the world. The world is investigatable. Human life matters, and we should be able to investigate the world to figure out how to make human life better and to improve our conditions because we care about people. So these worldview pieces are what motivated the first scientists. So I think it's absolutely compatible.
And you guys do a great job of pointing that out at the entrance of the museum, where that little holding area with all the scientists talking to us. And I think that really stood out as far as
yeah, for sure,
telling the audience, telling the crowd when you get there, hey, your science books and your view of history has been rewritten for you. These great minds thought a lot about God.
Yes, and we stand on their shoulders in a lot of ways.
All right, let me tell you about Eden Pure Thunderstorms before we get back to more with Dr. Brian Thomas. And I've got one of these thunderstorms in my hand right now. You see, they're very compact. They're not hard to install. They're the easiest install of all time. You pull out the little.
So you have to pull out the prongs like that.
Yeah, you have to pull that.
Too many steps. I can't remember all.
And then you plug it in.
Yeah, I don't know.
Yeah, and then what you do?
Okay,
this last step is really hard.
It's always something else.
Really hard, but watch me. I'm going to do it slow.
Okay,
so
we're watching.
You turn it on.
Wow.
Yeah.
Now you're a scientist all of a sudden.
Yeah.
Okay.
So it's that easy. You never have to change a filter. It purifies the air. It gets rid of odors, whether you've got litter box problems or cigarette smoke or really bad cooking things.
It makes it safe to invite Jeffy over to your house.
It does. It does, because in seconds you can eliminate the fact that he was ever there. It's great.
But you need 6 of them, though.
Yeah.
Right now you can get 3 of them. So if you invite, you might want to double that order.
Double that order, just to be safe.
But you'll save $200 on 3 thunderstorms, just 3 units for under $200. Go to EdenPureDeals.com, EDEN, EdenPureDeals.com. Enter the discount code PAT. That's EdenPureDeals.com, discount code PAT, and shipping is free.
Pat Gray Unleashed. We'll be right back after this.
Great to have you with us. 888-933-93. We have Dr. Brian Thomas in studio with us from the ICR Institute, the Discovery Center in Irving, Texas. If you ever get a chance, please visit. It's really worth the time. And bring your kids. It's really fun. It's an amazing place. Got a question here from Saving History. At what point in history has an explosion ever created anything? It destroys. It doesn't make planets.
That's a great point, actually.
Yeah,
that is a great point. And it goes back to the dinosaurs, and we're supposed to believe that an asteroid hit and then wiped everything out, right? Mm-hmm. But when we find, or at least you find in your studies, right, dinosaurs, we find them in pockets all around the world, and it had to have been because of at least this flood event, right? I mean, that's the only way that it could happen. If it was hit by an explosion or left just to die, they go away. There wouldn't be fossils, right?
Well, I mean, when creatures die today, let's say there's a local flood and and an old cow is down by the stream and looks up and here comes right. a wall of mud and it overtakes the cow. And so this happens periodically, even today. Mm-hmm. So we have these, but they're always constricted to river channels, but they never make fossils today. So something different happened in the past.
They don't make fossils anymore?
No.
Huh.
That's
God dang it.
I know.
That's strange.
Yeah,
isn't it?
I mean, it is. Even in the seafloor, when a creature dies, it gets scavenged. and what doesn't get scavenged rots. And so the whole carcass gets recycled within a matter of months. Even whales don't take any more than a few years. A 90-foot whale, and there's creatures that God designed to scavenge bones, and they're all throughout the ocean. So, but that did not happen to many, many, many bones in the distant past. And something preserved them and kept them from getting scavenged, and even from totally rotting. They're all partly rotted, of course. So when I look at that feature that you just mentioned there, I'm thinking to myself, something happened different in the past, and whatever it was worldwide. Because as you said,
right,
we have these dinosaur fossils on every continent,
and they're on every continent, and they're in pockets, right? I mean, when you find, like, you don't just run across one little piece of sojourn and say, "Oh, hey, here we are." I mean, there's hundreds or thousands of them.
We can call them death assemblages, and it looks like some watery. It looks like water, washed these carcasses into like a low spot or something. Right. So even my secular colleagues say that it was water, but they call upon multiple local floods that happened over eons. But they have to say that in order to fit the data into their timeline.
And the flood would have been created from the explosion or the impact on the earth, right?
The local flood that they talk about. Yeah. So, and that's a way to think about it. But I've rejected that view in favor of the worldwide flood view, because we find these death assemblages, we find these particular fossils in the same layer, and the layer that it's in extends for hundreds of square miles. So there's a death assemblage here, and maybe 10 miles over there's another one, or maybe 1 mile in a different direction. There's another pocket, like as you say, but they're all connected in the same sedimentary layer. And that layer can go across half a continent. That doesn't happen anywhere today, but it happened everywhere in the past. And what does the Bible say about the flood? It happened everywhere in the past.
Everywhere in the past.
I think
it's amazing how they fight against that, though. The secular science community they will not accept that there was ever a Noah's flood event. They say it's impossible for that kind of water to have occurred the planet wide, and then they don't believe that Noah's Ark could have fit two of each kind.
Right, the continents shifted over a period of 100 million years or 400 million years or however long they decide at who's ever asking or telling us. But that particular flood event with Noah happened in a year or a God year?
A year, right? And it was one horrendous year, and it was about 4,400 years ago, and that's what the Bible teaches. And so,
so we're not 7,000 years old, right?
Well, Noah wasn't the first.
Noah wasn't the first.
Yeah, he's down the line a little bit.
I mean, you never did answer how old we were, by the way. I never did answer that.
I said 6, but I was, yeah.
Yeah, but you would be the authority on that.
Yeah.
Jeffy, since you were there.
Right. We should carbon date him. See
I touch it.
We have more fossils in the room than I thought.
I'm glad you stopped by today, Doc. It's good to have you here.
We got this from Lynn. Question: if we're related to the ape, why don't apes today become human? I think the answer would be time on that, right? We don't see it happen because it takes far too long. Right.
Yeah, I don't.
Is that what they say?
Well, they say because they say they say my secular colleagues say that modern apes and modern humans both evolved from a common ancestor, and so that's their position. So so we don't. They're not saying that modern humans evolved from modern apes.
From modern apes.
They're from some different ape or some different species,
ape-like creature. But the problem with that is, which one is it?
Right.
And why is there
are they?
Zero consensus on which one it's supposed to be? Zero.
Interesting. Isn't that interesting?
That is interesting.
From Josh, evolution tries to cancel out what the Bible says that each animal reproduced after its kind. from 2 times. What about sin not only corrupting man, did it not corrupt the earth?
Oh, well, if you read Genesis 6, the start of the flood, God gives the reason why he flooded the world, and it's because the earth was filled with violence. And the earth was filled with violence. So I take that to mean that that the animals were violent too. And God wanted to flush and bathe the earth, baptize the globe, get rid of the violent humans as well as some of the violent animals. And we have
That's a good thing we don't see any of that anymore.
We do, of course, but maybe not to the degree that it existed back then. So,
Yeah.
but we see the fighting dinosaurs on display at the Discovery Center in the lobby there. And by the way, we're about 20 feet from Irving, but technically it's in Dallas.
Oh.
Yeah.
Oh,
Okay.
wow.
Okay, don't bog us down with
right.
facts.
Yeah.
Okay.
Sorry about
funny.
the reality, but
But it's on. Is it on Royal? Do you want to
on
give the
Royal.
address so if people?
Yeah.
Sure.
Yeah.
1830 Royal Lane, Dallas, Texas. Come on by.
Very close to our studios.
And you'll see the fighting dinosaurs. And it was a violent world. And some of those violent fights were actually like frozen in stone. Like how does that never happens today? But we think that's an indicator of A, the flood
Okay.
buried these creatures, and B, violence was really there.
Yeah. If there was a worldwide flood, that would have been a really heavy event, right, for the Earth. That's a lot of water, and water is heavy, so it would have compressed everything, right? Wouldn't that be one of the factors?
This is Pat Gray Unleashed.
Great to have you with us. 888-900-3393. We're joined today by Dr. Brian Thomas from the ICR Institute, talking about the Earth being 7,000 years old, not 4.5 billion. Adrian Slade tweets, "Someone please bring up Piltdown Man. I want to hear Pat go crazy." Yeah, this would be the show to do it, right?
I know.
To bring up
I know.
Piltdown Man. The 42-year hoax that we were all supposed to... that science knew. That was real. That was the missing link. We found it. Really? Okay. Then we've got this from Howard Newton. Your conversation on carbon dating is fascinating. Strengthens Pat's argument of oil being a renewable resource. We talked to one of the scientists.
Yeah, we did.
While we were there at your institute. And he didn't exactly believe in my renewable goo theory, but it was something close.
Yes, he believed that in the layers there's a process, right? And at a certain layer, that process creates the goo.
Yeah.
So it's a little different, but
You have any thoughts on oil being renewable rather than a fossil fuel?
Not really.
Not really?
Yeah.
Yeah. Not one of your not one of your interests.
So it sounds like you talked with our petroleum geologist, Dr. Tim Clary.
Yes, that's exactly who we talked to.
Yeah. And so we think that oil. He's told me at least that possibly oil, some oil. I'm not going to say all of it, but some oil. I guess emerges from like deeply buried coal layers, maybe something like that. Deeply buried organic matter.
Organic matter,
And so the oil, since it's less dense than water, it's going to rise until it hits a barrier underground, and then it's going to pool.
Right.
I don't know if that's, but one of the points that he makes, and I agree with completely, is oil itself, bacteria love to eat it, and it breaks down chemically.
Right.
So oxygen reacts with oil. And this is kind of why we have to change the oil in our car, is because it's not it's not an indefinitely, it doesn't live forever. And of course, heating it up in a car will accelerate its decay. But but nevertheless, it just doesn't last forever. And I don't think it can last for the hundreds of million years that my secular colleagues have assigned to it. Why haven't bacteria eaten it all?
Yeah. Right.
So it's another feature of our
should
Earth.
have by now. After 65 million years at least, it should all be gone.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. All right. We also have this Michael NP1701. I may have missed him talking about it, but there has been soft tissue and blood cells found inside dinosaur bones.
Yeah,
I think we do have some thoughts on that, don't you?
That's your deal, right?
That's what I researched. That's what I got my last degree in, and for that reason is because these blood vessels and tissues, sometimes whole tissues, but more often fossils will have.
Now, soft tissue wouldn't last for 65 million years.
Not even 1 million.
Yeah.
And the thing is, we measure the decay rates of these tissues, and the toughest tissues are probably something like collagen. So bone collagen, skin is made of like 95% of your skin is collagen protein. It's a tough, ropey, insoluble, so water washes right off of it. But still, it's a biological tissue, and so it's made of proteins, and proteins do chemistry.
Yeah.
Period.
Yeah.
And that's why your body constantly replaces old proteins in your bone, replaces old skin constantly, because the proteins are doing chemistry, and we have to replace those broken down proteins, or our bodies will fall apart. So that's what's happening in our bodies. But as soon as you die, you no longer are replacing those proteins. They just start to decay or they continue to decay without getting replaced. And but the stuff can last. I mean, think of the Dead Sea Scrolls. So that's parchment, which is made of sheep's skin, which is collagen protein, and that's 2,000 years old, these Dead Sea Scrolls. So it can last thousands of years, but not
millions.
Not millions, not at all.
Yeah.
Not even 1 million.
High Plains Stranger tweets, dinosaurs are currently roaming around Congress.
That's a good point.
Yeah, it is a good point, and that should not be the case. Joe Brislin, evolution remains a theory because the scientists can't explain the following. There are no transitional fossils. All 12 steps of blood clotting are needed. Both white and blood cells and antibodies are needed, and mutations in DNA always hinder. Okay. Your thoughts on those? You've probably...
It sounds like he's been reading Institute for Creation Research articles.
Yeah, that's great.
And that was your point with talking about how they insert guesses on there, which then leads to, that's just the way it is.
Just the way it is.
It's the way it is.
Mm-hmm. Back to the Noah situation. One of the things that I hear all the time is that, okay, if the story is literal, if it's actually true, then at the end of that journey, there was just Noah's family, right? And you would have had to create the rest of humanity from that gene pool. And so how is that possible when they were all related? Those are the kinds of things that people, talk about. What about the DNA and marrying among family members is not a good idea? And how do you explain that?
Great question.
Yeah.
But my answer is going to be longer than a soundbite.
Okay.
Is that okay?
Yeah.
Is that acceptable?
We've got some time here. Mm-hmm.
Okay. So first of all, remember that in the creation, the biblical creation paradigm or model, God made Adam and Eve with perfect genetics in the beginning. Mm-hmm. And so it wasn't until many, many generations later that and after sin and its effects, began to have a mutation accumulation. Okay, so we're accumulating more and more mutations with every new generation.
Okay.
So we're not
because of sin.
Because of the brokenness of this world.
Yeah.
Which is because of sin, according to the Bible. And so we're not evolving. Our genes aren't improving. We're actually devolving. We're degrading over time.
Yeah.
As a human race. So we get that from the scripture. Mm-hmm. And it matches exactly what we see in science with about 100 new mutations every generation today. So if you took people from today, but we've inherited 100 new mutations roughly, according to the latest tallies by geneticists doing genome comparisons. I've got 100 more mutations than my dad had. But I have 100 more than him, but he also inherited the 100 from his father.
Right.
And the 100 from his father's father, et cetera. So we've got all these, so we've got several thousand now So if I take people from today's mutation-laden populations and founded a new population and said, okay, you 8 people that are on the ark, go start a new humanity. Absolutely. If we took today's people, it would not work. We'd have a mutational meltdown and a population collapse. But that's not what the Bible teaches. It teaches that it was Noah and his family, and they were much closer. Only purer. So only, 10 or so generations removed from Adam in those 1,600 so years, 1656 years from creation to the flood. So it's only 10 generations because they lived so long.
Right.
Another topic there. But
and a good one. I like that topic. Too. That's
Think
one of my
about
favorites.
Abraham. He married his half-sister. No problem. And from him, nations have come from him.
Right.
And no problems with mutation accumulate. It just humanity hadn't been around long enough to accumulate enough mutations for this to be a problem. And
their bodies were purer.
Yes, and it only became a problem in Moses' time, and then the Mosaic Law. That's where we see the introduction of don't marry your sister. That's when incest became a thing.
Right. So you do believe that Adam and Noah lived 800, 900 plus years.
And the reason I do is because, several reasons, but one is, why not? If you got such pristine genetics.
Right.
Why not?
Right. But people don't grant you that point, really, in the secular world. And in fact, I know a lot of religious people, strongly religious people who don't, for whatever reason, believe it. And I'm like, God could do that if he wanted to, right? He can make strong, wholesome, perfected bodies if he wanted to, or certainly more perfected than we are. Over time, there was degradation.
Right. Well, he said, behold, it is all very good.
Yeah.
He said that in the beginning.
Right.
So, I tend to nowadays take him at his word.
Yeah.
On that issue as well as every other issue. But another, I guess, detail that scoffers, isn't it easy to scoff? Mm-hmm. Like, it's a cop-out. It's like, everyone else scoffs, I'm going to do it too. And boom, I'm in the club.
I don't know what you're talking about.
Welcome to Twitter.
So it takes a brave person to look into a matter.
Yeah.
Maybe something like that. And but if you plot the ages of these patriarchs in Genesis 11, these folks who lived after the flood, after the bottleneck, the constriction of all humans down to the 8 that were on board the ark, which Peter also identifies in 1 Peter, the lifespans systematically decline. And if you plot them, it generates a decay curve, which we see in biology all the time.
Yeah, and so they stopped living 900 years.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Much shorter lifespan.
But it's an S-shaped, it's a sigmoidal decay curve that matches what we see when we do today's population constriction. So you could take two healthy wolves from a wolf population that's interbreeding with all kinds of different individuals, and you isolate them and get them to marry, get the next generation to marry within that family, brothers and sisters. You're going to see a lifespan decrease there too.
Yeah,
that kind of thing. You can do it with guppies or whatever, and so you get the same curve. So it's a biologically relevant decay curve if you plot the biblical data.
We will finish up with Dr. Brian Thomas from the ICR Institute in just a minute. First, let me tell you about Factor. This is so great. It's summer. You might be looking for wholesome, convenient meals to support these sunny, active days. Factor is America's #1 ready-to-eat meal kit, and it can help you fuel up fast. Not just fuel up, but provide you with really delicious gourmet meals that are not a hassle at all. You just heat them up. Put them in the microwave for 2 minutes. You're ready to go and eat a delicious meal. They've got 34 plus weekly restaurant quality options: bruschetta shrimp risotto, the green goddess chicken, the grilled steakhouse filet mignon. Those are, again, it's ready in 2 minutes. Is the dinner bell ringing now, Jeffy? Yeah, Jeffy's ready to eat, which is not much of a surprise. With Factor, you could rest assured you're making a sustainable choice. They offset 100% of their delivery emissions. They source 100% renewable electricity for their production sites and offices. Even though I don't necessarily ask that of them, they're doing it anyway. Head to factormeals.com/Pat50 and use the promo code PAT50 to get 50% off. Makes sense. 50% off. That's code PAT50 at factormeals.com/Pat50 to get 50% off.
This is Pat Gray Unleashed.
Back again with Dr. Brian Thomas from the ICR Institute, from the Discovery Center. Are there any big events coming up at the Discovery Center that we should know about?
Mega conference, Phoenix area, the Phoenix area. Yeah,
Okay.
so you just go to icr.org and then click the events tab, and that's a good way to get equipped. To get equipped and even maybe a little energized. And how do I navigate this world where I'm going to believe what the Bible says about the past in a world that scoffs at that position? So it helps to equip ourselves with reasons to believe what it says, and some of them are scientific. So we'll be presenting that. A range of our scientists will be in the Phoenix area.
October 12th for that event.
Yeah, thank you. October 12th.
I love the fact that you guys put so much faith in God, because that's where our faith belongs. And in this world today, it just seems like people have lost touch with that, with that He's omnipotent, that He can do anything. And that's why, I was really curious to ask you about the age of the universe. Well, we asked at the Discovery Center a few weeks ago and found out it was 7,000 years, just like the Earth. But how then do you get the light from a star that's 28 billion light years away? Miracles. I think to me that makes sense. To non-religious people, I'm sure it doesn't.
Well, you have to be open to the idea of miracles, and we live in a culture that's
not,
anti-miracle.
That's for sure.
But
so I suppose you're going to tell us next that the Earth is round. Okay.
What about life on other planets? How does that fit in, or does it in your belief structure?
It doesn't really. Well, first of all, there's no scientific evidence for it, and there's scientific evidence against it. Every place out there that we've looked at is just sterile.
Yeah.
And so
you discount the fact that could He not have created other planets with other people as well?
Oh, well, He could have.
Worlds without end
think
is
about,
what He's created. So I would think, well, I do think that there's life somewhere out there, but they look like us. They're not little green men. They're created in His image, just like we are.
Oh, I don't think that's possible because of all the scriptures that say Christ died once for all.
Right.
And He did
including
that.
other planets to me, but
all would be encompassing that.
Yeah.
Well, but then He'd have to go over there to that planet and communicate with them. So there's just no information that is the case. So it's kind of an argument from
other
silence.
sheep I have also that I also must visit, and maybe those were some of the sheep. No. Yes. No.
No.
I'm not gonna fight you on this one.
Okay. It's
so, but the focus of God in history in the Bible
on our
is
planet.
on Earth.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so speaking of Earth, we measure time by Earth-based clocks. And so how do you get all those distant, very far away stars? And how do we get all that light? We don't need the light to get here in 6,000 years. We need to get it here in one day. We need to get it here so that when Adam and Eve opened their eyes for the first time, they saw the stars. So we have to get that starlight here in the day. And it turns out that you can have, according to Einstein's general relativity, you can have a lot of time elapse out there and no time elapsing here on Earth. And so we have lots of creation physicists who have constructed models, but you do have to have a miracle to get these.
Right. It's all based on the miracle.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right.
I think it's fascinating that people like Einstein, if I'm not mistaken, he did believe, right? He believed in God.
Well, he used the word God, but again, I think if you were to ask him, what do you mean by that? He would say, oh, the whole
Something
construct,
different than
the
us.
laws of physics.
Right. Yeah.
Something like that.
And didn't Stephen Hawking, I don't know if he did at the end of his life, but at some point, I think he also believed, right?
That may be an urban myth.
Really?
So obviously,
No?
Or a rural myth. I don't know.
a lot of this discussion. Oh, I like that. That was fun. Urban and rural. It took me a moment. It's a deep topic, trying to establish the proper age of the Earth. If you're on an airplane and you're sitting next to somebody who knows what you do for a living, what's your elevator pitch? Like, what do you lead with when you're trying to explain why you believe that the Earth is merely 7,000 years old?
I bet you don't explain it on elevators. Yeah. Take a little longer than the ride. But anyway.
I lead with, well, what do you believe?
Mm-hmm. Right. Yeah. Just questions, right? You
just
talked about
questions.
Just questions. You just question them.
But if someone were to ask, that's a good question. I don't know if I have an elevator pitch because it's not an elevator. It's like Pat just said. It's like it took me 5 years to read books.
And I understand that. Unfortunately, we live in a society, a TikTok generation, where attention spans are so minute.
If the clip's longer than 30 seconds, they're not interested. So
maybe
it makes it difficult.
I just say, well, it's what about dinosaur blood vessels? Because that's what I study.
Yeah.
And
that'll shut them up. I actually.
That's interesting. Can I get a Diet Coke?
I know that during one of the breaks here, Pat was talking, and I actually I heard a preacher use this exact example at one point, was that if you believe in evolution, you're believing that you can take a box of, what is it, watch parts, shake it up.
Yeah, you put a bunch of parts of a watch into a box and you shake it for 4.5 billion years, and what comes out at the end is a Rolex.
Ta-da!
Is that going to happen? No, that's not going to happen. It's silly to me.
Yeah.
Silly.
Takes a lot of faith.
It does.
That takes more faith.
It takes more faith in Charles Darwin.
Yeah.
Then we're exercising to believe the opposite.
Yeah.
It's amazing to me. It's amazing. Let me ask you one final question, because you brought up Adam and Eve a few minutes ago. How long do you think they spent in the Garden of Eden?
Oh, the text doesn't reveal the answer to that, so we don't know.
Right. So, but I mean, two people who believe both in God and current theory from secular scientists. Could they have been there for 4 billion years? And then left the garden?
No, because they didn't have kids yet.
Right.
So I think it was fewer than 9 months because they hadn't had any kids. I mean, they started having kids. They were able to have, be fruitful and multiply, said God.
But that was at the end, right, when they left. Weren't they leaving when he said that?
No, it's at creation.
Okay.
Yeah. So be fruitful, multiply, fill the earth and subdue it. Genesis chapter 1, that's the creation week. So it's day 6 there is when he said it. And so they were immediately able to be fruitful and multiply, but they didn't have enough time. So you think it was
very, very short time.
They didn't have enough time in the garden to have their first child. So that you have to get to the after the fall when they started dropping pups, as they say in East Texas.
It's a fascinating topic that it's been fun to explore. Thanks for coming.
A range of topics, and thank you guys for having me.
So please check out the ICR Institute and the Discovery Center, because we had a great time.
We did, and you guys are doing great work there. No question
really
about that. Very impressive.
Now, the general public, you don't really have a tour that goes in with the scientists and they show them the fish and all that, right? So you're just going to have to take our word for that right now.
Yeah, that's right.
But there's all kinds of stuff to do there and movies to see. And I I was pleasantly surprised by the technology that's involved. It's a lot of fun, and I think your whole family will enjoy it. Thanks for coming, Brian. Appreciate it.
My pleasure.
When you come up with your elevator pitch, maybe we'll have you back. Okay, but
I'll work on that.
Well, if it was an elevator pitch, we wouldn't need to spend 2 hours on it, right?
Correct.
So it's probably a good thing that he doesn't have the elevator pitch. All right, we've got overtime still coming up. Also, this is a big weekend.
No doubt about
it. Because college football
football
begins.
starts week 0, baby.
We got Navy and Notre Dame this weekend, right?
Yeah, there's like 6 or 7 games, maybe 8, something like that.
And then next week, on Thursday night, is Keith's team, Nebraska. On Saturday is my team, BYU, taking on the mighty Sam Houston State Bearcats. And then who does Missouri start out with?
Don't know.
You don't even know.
School of the Blind.
He doesn't even know.
All
right, so have a great weekend. We'll see you back here on Monday.
This is Pat Gray Unleashed.